A documentary on the ties that bind the Chinese and Americans. The lowdown on Better Angels from the film director and producer right after this break. Welcome back. You're still watching World Insight with me, Tian Wei. Next, we turn to Pathfinder, our special series on China-U.S. relations and the people that are trying to make a difference. In the eyes of those who view global dominance as a zero-sum game, the rise of China threatens the prosperity of the U.S. But this narrow view is not shared by all. Today, let's meet Oscar-winning filmmaker Malcolm Clarke and producer William Mundell, who have been working on a mission to turn around the mainstream Western narrative on China. They brought stories of ordinary Chinese and Americans to the big screen. Their documentary called Better Angels in Us, and also shines light on common Chinese and American people, such as Texan football coach in Shanghai, who realized his American dream in China, and a Chinese businessman in Iowa who built a China-U.S. franchise house as part of his China dream. Called Accidental Diplomats are the real people that are making a huge difference. Listen in. There are comments suggesting it is very propagandic. I just wonder, from a producer and the director's perspective, how do you see those comments?
The problem with making a film on this subject today is that the situation has hardened so much that in America, if you do not make an anti-China film, an overtly anti-China film, then we are accused of being pro-China. Now, I can say for myself, and I think for Bill also, we are certainly not in this film trying to make a pro-China or a pro-America film. The film is pro-America and China getting along.
Well, Mr. Mundell?
We wanted to create a call to action. We wanted the American people and the Chinese people, as distinct from their governments, to become true stakeholders in what is, without a doubt, the most important bilateral relationship in the world. Obviously, we've reached a critical inflection point in the U.S.-China relationship, and there's no more important time than now to have an informed citizenry. And we very explicitly took the best of America and the best of China, and we asked the question, what happens when you put those two better halves together?
Having said that, though, what is it like for both of you when you are filming the documentary, producing it, and see the bilateral relations apparently falling day by day, literally?
It reinforces the message of this film. And the message of this film is that if we follow the example of the so-called accidental diplomats, those ordinary Americans and ordinary Chinese who are seeking to bridge the physical and metaphysical distance that divides our two countries, that is the vehicle to transform the U.S.-China relationship from one where we barely tolerate our differences to one where we can start capitalizing on our differences. So the short answer to your question is, when we see these headlines, it just reinforces that we are on the right mission in this film.
There are a lot of stories you told, beautiful stories from both sides in the documentary. But the question is, I mean, there are enormous amount of stories going on, undiscovered. So how are you selecting your stories? And to what extent are you selecting your stories and go deeper about that story and that person?
We filmed 800 hours of film.
Oh my God, my friend, did you?
We chose 1.5 hours. So the vast majority of these stories did not make it into the film. The stories that made it into the film were stories which were emotionally resonant and by implication told more than just the stories of the individuals, they had a greater and wider impact.
Give me some example.
So, for example, one of the things that we had noticed as we made this film was the extraordinary price that ordinary Chinese people have paid for this economic miracle. This didn't happen overnight, and it didn't happen without a lot of pain and effort and dedication on the part of the Chinese people. I don't think that Americans understand that. They don't see it. And so we wanted to tell a story which was emotionally engaging. You know, a young man who goes to Africa, who separates himself from his family, who doesn't see his unborn and then born child. Those things are terribly difficult emotionally, and they're very resonant. And then, at the same time, we say, this is the price.
喂，啊，该听你说了，刚刚在玩嘛。
晚上做梦了，梦见儿子的。
做梦都梦见。晚上做点了好吃的吃，然后开开心心的过年，嘎。
好，再见了，嘎。哎，好，再见，嘎，拜拜。好。
拜拜。来。
I mean, personally, before you try to portray his story, how did you get to know him?
That was a very expensive and arduous piece of filmmaking, probably the most
Fortunately,
complicated.
your executive director is not sitting here in the room.
No, that's because they're trying to figure out how to pay the bills. We had a very, very good team of researchers. We had an excellent Chinese producer, Han Yi, who supervised all the Chinese and helped very strongly select all these people. We don't speak Mandarin, neither Bill nor I.
Yeah.
And so we had to rely heavily on someone who was an experienced documentary filmmaker who could select these people to be in our film.
Right.
I think more broadly, the characters are used to shatter the myths that Americans have about China and Chinese have about America.
What are these myths?
Well, one of the myths, as our director has just said, is that there is a dark side to globalization for the Chinese people. The American people certainly understand what the downside to globalization has been for them. There's been a hollowing of the middle class of America.
Yeah.
What we show is that the Chinese middle class, not even fully formed at this stage, still growing, is also experiencing significant disruption from their job base. Jobs are migrating from China to Southeast Asia. They're migrating from China to Africa.
Right.
The sequence in Africa that Malcolm just talked about is part of a phenomena where 6 in children in China grow up without a mother and a father. That's a sociological phenomena, the likes of which the world has never seen. And that is something that is not widely reported in the mainstream media.
It's very interesting. We always assume we are climbing the highest mountain in the world, every one of us. But we forget that every one of us around us actually is climbing as high a mountain as we are. So it's very important that we are thinking with empathy and sympathy for the others as well.
I think the other thing is that and we show this, I think, in the film as well, the Americans and the Chinese are really kindred spirits. The China of today has great similarities with America's own frontier past. China today is willing to take risks that America used to take and now shies away from. And I think if we can harness this greater appetite for risk on the part of the Chinese and deploy that to underdeveloped areas of America, to the so-called forgotten class, those long-term unemployed that were the first victims of globalization, I think that could be transformational for the U.S.-China relationship.
Beautiful said. But many would say, are you doing your wishful thinking? I mean, are you trying to say better angels will be the guide for us for geopolitics?
There is absolutely no reason why the rise of China needs to coincide with the decline of the United States. These two great countries can rise together if the leadership of both countries figure out the policies for that to happen.
All right. Is Mr. Mundell have wishful thinking, Mr. Clarke?
Well, if he does, I share it. It's very easy to criticize anyone who tries to bring together two great superpowers, and obviously a 90-minute film can do very, very little. The problem is that the American press seems to have been obsessed by 4 or 5 big issues, all of which are hugely important in the relationship between America and China. And they very rarely look beyond those issues. If we can affect public opinion, all the people who have seen this film in China, and we've shown it to students and we've shown it to policymakers, everybody has said that they agree with the philosophy, the underlying theme of the film, which is very simple. It makes no sense for two superpowers on the planet not to do everything in their power to get along. The big problem that I see, and it's something that we try to address in this film, is that I feel there's a real information deficit between the two countries, which we try to address a little bit in the film, but the Chinese indisputably understand America way better than Americans understand China.
China is in so many ways becoming what we sort of imagine ourselves to be. People go to China to get a glimpse of the future now, when it comes to infrastructure and technology. And for us in the United States, that's threatening.
There are some people in this country who would like to make China an enemy.
It is the greatest opportunity lost that mankind has seen.
We're not yet enemies.
When we think about the one place that seems to be doing us better than we're doing us, it's them.
And they are the #2 economy in the world.
You've got these two countries that are in so many ways inextricably connected, and yet are also deeply, philosophically, morally suspicious of each other. And the question is, how do we get past that suspicion? How do we get to a point where we acknowledge all the things that we have in common?
People-to-people relations is important. It always should be in the fabric of the relationship. And yet, is it too little, too late?
I think we shouldn't beat around the bush. I think the economic relationship between the United States and China needs to be reset. And I applaud President Trump for bringing this issue to a head. What I don't agree with is the method by which the administration is carrying that out right now. This singular obsession with the trade deficit, I think, is both dangerous and wrong-headed. I worry about the infrastructure deficit in the United States. I worry about the fact that there are 30,000 schools in America with chip paint. I worry about the fact that we don't have a single mile of high-speed rail line in America. I worry about the fact that some of our airports, like JFK, are basically not up to 21st century standards. The easiest way to reset the economic relationship and also to close that infrastructure gap would be for China to deploy a portion of its Belt and Road Initiative to the United States.
Well, we have quite a number of ideas as to how these two countries and economies and people could work together so that more common ground can be created, less fear as a result about one another. But the question is, you know, we are already, some argue, Mr. Clarke, reaching this pivotal moment. The two heads of state have to decide which path they would prefer these two economies and countries to grow, whether grow ever more apart, or we can turn a little bit from both sides and gear ourselves a little bit closer than we used to be over the past few years. This is the pivotal moment, and therefore the question once again comes back to you. I mean, how much difference a documentary could make?
Well, I don't think we can do an awful lot if they choose otherwise. We have made a 90-minute film. The one thing that I will argue for quite strongly is that, with great respect to you and your colleagues and the Chinese media, I think you guys could do a much better job. I don't think you should be looking to people like Bill and I to come and make a film about China-America relations and about the Chinese people.
Are you trying to turn the table, Mr. Clarke?
Yes, I am. I am trying to very gently and very constructively say, if China was better at telling its own story to the world, and I don't mean propaganda. That does not work. It doesn't wash in the West. We know it's propaganda and we dismiss it. Let me finish. So what I'm saying is, if you guys, instead of making propaganda, would make honest-to-goodness films about the loves and hates and triumphs and failures and struggles of the Chinese people, as they have brought about this extraordinary miracle in the last 30 years, if you could do that and help us do what we do, together we can tell the Chinese story to the rest of the world in a way that the world does not find suspicious or frightening, but they actually admire China.
Let me just add to that, because I think this is important. They said the exact same thing about another film, that it would never create the kind of dramatic change that its proponents argued it would. That film was called Inconvenient Truth. It ended up grossing $110 million on the box office, but more importantly, it changed the agenda, the environmental agenda of the largest economy of the world, the United States of America.
Both of what you have just said reminds me of the fact that, for example, Mr. Clarke is not necessarily that familiar with China-U.S. relations before he's working on this movie. And yet, through the process of making the movie and working with Bill and some of your colleagues from both countries, you have become a very passionate speaker and advocate of this relationship. This must be quite a process, I would say, for you personally. How did that work?
You know, 5 years ago, I knew very little about China. Bill asked me to make the film. It was Bill's passion and it was Bill's drive that persuaded me to make the film.
And Bill enjoyed, together with you, the fact that you didn't know much about China before this, and yet this is a discovering process for you.
In a sense, the perfect person, because I didn't know anything. So it was tabula rasa. I was a blank sheet. I came with no preoccupations and, and more important, no prejudices.
And we wanted a fresh look. That was the whole idea of the film, because the old way of looking at it had been done.
See? And where is the fresh look now?
Well,
less fresh.
Less fresh. Yes.
Much fresher, I would argue.
Yes, yes. I'm wilting a little bit. But the interesting thing is, I have become a great admirer of China. I don't think that China is perfect in any respect. And people who say, oh, you become totally pro-China. I'm not pro-China. Remember, I'm English. I have no kind of dog in this fight. You know, I still give both of them a B+. I don't give them an A, because they could do better.
There has never been a time where either both the American people and the Chinese people have been more curious about this relationship. So in that sense, the timing for the release of this film could not have been better.
A film, especially a good film, is a weapon. It's a weapon which can change hearts and it can change minds. What I hope for with Better Angels is that it provokes more soul-searching in the United States, and that people see it and they see a little bit of the soul of the Chinese people in this film. If we can do that, and if we can show the Chinese government and the Chinese film community that a film like this can change the needle, can push the needle just a little bit, then I think we've done, we've fulfilled our mandate. We've done a little bit to change things in the world. And frankly, we can't really hope for more than that. Well, I would feel proud if I thought we'd done that.
The Better Angels in Us. Thank you for the film director and producer. And that's all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more, search World Insight or check out our YouTube channel. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook. I'm Tian Wei. On behalf of the team, thanks for watching.